The Westerly Heights apartment complex stood on the outskirts of the city like a gray concrete monument to forgotten dreams. 20 stories high, it housed nearly 2,000 souls, yet in the 3 months since Luna disappeared, her mother Maya had never felt more alone. The building rose against the perpetually overcast sky, its windows like empty eyes staring out at the industrial wasteland beyond. Maya had chosen this place 4 years ago for 2 reasons. The rent was affordable on a nurse's salary, and the third-floor unit had a small kitchen window where Luna could watch the pigeons gather on the balcony. It was supposed to be temporary, just until she saved enough for something safer. But life had a way of extending temporary situations into permanent traps. The morning of September 14th had started like any other. Maya worked the night shift at Mercy General, 12 hours of monitoring vitals and changing 4 bags. She returned home at 7:15 a.m., exhausted. Luna was already dressed for school, eating cereal at the small Formica table. She reminded her mother about a promise to make macaroni that evening. Maya kissed her head and collapsed into bed. Mrs. Patterson from apartment 4B handled the morning routine. The elderly widow walked Luna to the bus stop in exchange for Maya picking up her blood pressure medication. Simple transactions between single mothers and lonely seniors kept the building functioning. By 7:45, Maya slept behind blackout curtains while gray morning light struggled to penetrate her room. She drifted off to the sound of distant traffic and a dripping bathroom faucet. At 3:17 p.m., Maya's phone alarm woke her. 3 missed calls from the elementary school appeared on the screen. Her heart performed an irregular flutter she recognized from years of monitoring cardiac patients. The principal delivered news in carefully neutral tones. Luna had not been picked up from the bus stop. The driver waited 12 minutes before returning her to school. 2 hours had passed while Maya slept. She dressed without bothering to brush her hair, taking the stairs 3 flights down instead of waiting for the elevator. The lobby contained only Mr. Elias from apartment 2C, an elderly man who spent his days by the mailboxes pretending to read a newspaper. He had not seen Mrs. Patterson that day. She usually collected her mail around noon, but today she never appeared. Maya climbed to the 4th floor and knocked until her knuckles hurt. Silence answered from within. The door was locked. Back in her own unit, Maya contacted the school, then the police non-emergency line, then Mrs. Patterson's cell phone, which went straight to voicemail. 2 uniformed officers arrived at 5:30 p.m. They sat in Maya's small living room, taking notes on pocket-sized pads. One asked questions while the other examined the apartment with wandering eyes, cataloging the thrift store furniture and peeling linoleum. Officer Collins had a small mustache that looked like an afterthought. He asked when Maya last saw her daughter. 7:15 that morning, eating cereal. He asked about Mrs. Patterson. Yesterday afternoon, borrowing sugar. Normal behavior. The other officers suggested Luna might have wandered off. Children did that sometimes, he said. They saw something interesting and followed it. Maya stared at him. Her daughter was 7. She had taken that same bus for 2 years. She knew not to talk to strangers. Collins closed his notebook. They would file a report, put out a description. But 24 hours was the standard waiting period unless evidence of foul play existed. Right now, they had a child who missed her bus and an elderly woman who didn't show up. Concerning, but not enough. After they left, Maya stood in her living room and felt the silence press in from all sides. Luna's backpack remained by the door. A half-finished drawing was taped to the refrigerator.
Maya called everyone that evening. Luna's teacher sounded genuinely concerned. The parents of Luna's two friends hadn't seen her. The bus company promised to have their driver call back.
Mrs. Patterson's daughter lived in another state and hadn't spoken to her mother in 3 weeks.
By midnight, exhaustion dragged at Maya's eyelids, but sleep refused to come.
She sat at the kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee, watching the parking lot through the window. Every pair of headlights that entered made her heart leap. Every set of taillights that departed made it sink. The building at night revealed a different character than its daytime self. Voices echoed through thin walls.
Arguments erupted and faded.
Television light flickered behind curtains.
People came and went at odd hours, their purposes unknown.
Maya had lived here 4 years and realized she knew almost nothing about her neighbors.
Their names, sometimes.
Their faces, vaguely. But their lives remained behind closed doors, as secret and inaccessible as whatever happened to Mrs. Patterson that morning.
Dawn broke gray and reluctant. Maya called the police station at 7 a.m. The officer who answered couldn't find any report matching her description. She explained everything again. He took notes. He promised someone would call back.
3 days passed without answers.
The police visited once more, took slightly more detailed notes, and disappeared again.
Mrs. Patterson's daughter arrived from out of state, entered her mother's apartment with a landlord's key, and found nothing amiss. The bed was made. Dishes sat in the drying rack. Her mother's purse remained on the kitchen counter with money still inside.
Maya attended the brief conversation between the daughter and the police.
The daughter seemed more annoyed than worried, muttering about her mother's increasing forgetfulness and the possibility of a senior moment turning into a minor crisis.
She would check hospitals, she said. Maybe the old woman had a fall somewhere. But Maya remembered something. Mrs. Patterson never forgot Luna. The morning routine was the most important part of her day.
She once told Maya that walking a child to school made her feel useful again, like she still had purpose in a world that had forgotten old people existed.
Luna's school sent a counselor to check on Maya.
The woman meant well, offering platitudes about community resources and support groups.
Maya accepted the brochures politely and placed them on the coffee table where they collected dust.
She stopped sleeping. Night shifts had trained her body to function on minimal rest, but this was different. This was a constant alertness that refused to surrender to unconsciousness. On the 4th night, Maya began her own investigation. She started with what she knew. Mrs. Patterson left her apartment at approximately 2:30 p.m. every weekday to reach the bus stop by 2:45. She waited with her folding chair and crossword puzzles until the bus arrived at 3 o'clock. She walked Luna back to the building and returned to her apartment by 3:20. The timeline mattered. Sometime between noon, when Mr. Elias last saw her collecting mail, and 2:30 p.m., something interrupted this routine. Something prevented her from leaving her apartment. Or something happened after she left. Maya examined the 4th-floor hallway. A single security camera covered the elevator bank, but it hadn't worked in 18 months according to a handwritten sign taped to the wall. The stairwells had no cameras at all. Anyone could move through this building unseen. She knocked on every door on the 4th floor. Most residents didn't answer. Those who did claimed to have seen nothing. A young man in 4D worked from home and heard footsteps occasionally, but nothing unusual. A woman in 4F had been visiting her sister that week. An elderly couple in 4H were hard of hearing.
The fifth floor yielded even less information. People avoided eye contact. Doors opened a crack, chains engaged, conversations remained brief. Maya understood.
In buildings like this, residents learned that curiosity invited trouble. The best strategy was seeing nothing, hearing nothing, knowing nothing. By the end of the first week, Maya had covered all 20 floors. She compiled notes in a spiral notebook, recording names, apartment numbers, and the varying degrees of indifference she encountered.
3 people stood out.
Mr. Elias from 2C had been in the lobby that morning. He claimed not to have seen Mrs. Patterson leave, but he also claimed to watch everyone who passed.
The contradiction bothered Maya. If he watched everyone, how did he miss the one person she cared about?
A man in 7B named Victor worked nights at a warehouse. He returned home around 3 a.m. most mornings and claimed to have seen a woman matching Mrs. Patterson's description in the stairwell late one night the previous week. But his timeline placed this sighting days before the disappearance, and his description remained vague when pressed.
The most interesting response came from a teenage girl in 12D.
She told Maya that her mother worked as a cleaner and sometimes took evening jobs in other apartments. The girl mentioned that her mother cleaned Mrs. Patterson's unit once, months ago, and commented that the old woman had too many prescription bottles for someone living alone.
Maya wrote everything down.
None of it connected yet, but connections formed slowly in cases like this.
She knew this from years of watching true crime documentaries during sleepless nights. Small details accumulated until suddenly they meant something. The second week brought rain.
Gray sheets of water fell from an unbroken sky, turning the parking lot into a shallow lake and forcing residents indoors.
Maya watched the downpour from her kitchen window and thought about Luna's fear of thunderstorms.
Her daughter would hide under the bed covers during bad weather, demanding stories about calm places with constant sunshine. Mrs. Patterson's daughter called to report that she had checked every hospital within 50 miles.
No unidentified elderly women had been admitted.
No Jane Does matched her mother's description. She sounded tired now, the annoyance replaced by something closer to genuine concern. She asked Maya to call if anything changed. The police officially classified the case as a missing persons investigation.
An officer visited to take a formal statement from Maya about Luna.
He asked the same questions as before and received the same answers. He assured her that these things sometimes resolved themselves.
People returned. Children came home. Families reunited. Maya wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust that somewhere out there, Luna was safe and warm and waiting to be found.
But the rain kept falling, and the days kept passing, and the world kept spinning as if nothing had changed. On the 10th day, she returned to work. Her supervisor expressed sympathy and assigned her to light duties. Maya appreciated the gesture even as she resented the implication that she needed special treatment. Working nights again changed the investigation.
Maya now moved through the building during hours when most residents slept.
She learned the sounds of Westerly Heights after midnight, the hum of ancient elevators, the creak of settling concrete, the occasional cough from behind closed doors. At 2 a.m. on her third night back, she sat in the lobby pretending to read a magazine. Mr. Elias had long since retired to his apartment.
The front desk stood empty, as it always did after 11 p.m.
Anyone could enter or exit without being observed. A man emerged from the stairwell. Mid-30s, average height, wearing a janitorial uniform. He carried a bucket and mop, the tools of a profession that operated invisibly while residents slept. He nodded at Maya without making eye contact and pushed through the exit door into the rainy night. Maya followed him with her eyes until he disappeared into the darkness.
Something about him nagged at her memory.
She had seen him before, multiple times, always carrying cleaning supplies, always at odd hours. She checked her notebook.
No janitor appeared in any of her interviews.
The next morning, she asked the building superintendent about cleaning staff.
He laughed and said they couldn't afford janitors.
Residents handled their own trash and maintenance. Anyone she saw with cleaning supplies was either a tenant with a side business or someone who didn't belong.
The realization hit Maya like a physical blow. Someone had been moving through Westerly Heights pretending to be part of the building's infrastructure. Someone who knew that janitors attracted no attention, that people looked through them rather than at them. Someone who could enter apartments under the guise of cleaning and observe without being observed in return. She returned to the stairwell where she had seen the man emerge. The concrete steps bore years of scuffs and stains, but fresh watermarks led downward to the basement level. Maya had never explored the basement.
Most residents avoided it, preferring not to think about what lurked beneath their feet.
The basement door was unlocked.
It opened onto a dim corridor lined with storage cages, each secured with a padlock.
Faded numbers indicated which apartment each cage belonged to. The air smelled of mold and rust and something else, something chemical that Maya couldn't identify. She walked slowly past the cages, peering through chain link at forgotten belongings.
Bicycles with flat tires. Cardboard boxes labeled in faded marker. Furniture too damaged to use but too sentimental to discard.
Nothing unusual until she reached cage 4B. Mrs. Patterson's storage unit stood open. The padlock hung loose, apparently cut rather than unlocked.
Inside, someone had recently disturbed the dust, leaving footprints that led to a stack of plastic bins.
Maya's hands trembled as she pulled out her phone and illuminated the storage cage.
The footprints were fresh, probably from within the last day or two. They led directly to a bin labeled medical in Mrs. Patterson's careful handwriting. Inside the bin, she found prescription bottles dating back years.
High blood pressure medication.
Arthritis pain relievers.
Sleeping aids. The bottles were arranged chronologically, a pharmaceutical history of an elderly woman's declining health.
But one bottle stood out. It was empty, unlike the others, and it bore a prescription date from 3 weeks before the disappearance.
Maya recognized the medication immediately.
She had administered it countless times at the hospital. Strong sedatives, the kind used for patients undergoing minor procedures. The kind that could render an elderly woman unconscious within minutes. She photographed everything with her phone, then climbed back to the 3rd floor with her mind racing. Someone had access to Mrs. Patterson's storage.
Someone knew about her medical history.
Someone had used that knowledge to incapacitate her and remove her from the building without resistance.
The question that haunted Maya was simple. Why would anyone target a harmless old woman whose only purpose was walking a child to school? Maya called Detective Morrison the next morning.
He had inherited the case after the initial officers proved useless, and he at least pretended to take her seriously. She explained what she found in the basement. He listened without interrupting, then asked if she had touched anything. She admitted she had opened the bin. His sigh traveled clearly through the phone.
Contaminated evidence, he explained.
Anything she found would be difficult to use in court. But he would send someone to examine the scene anyway, just in case.
2 hours later, a forensic technician arrived.
He photographed the open cage, the cut padlock, the disturbed bin.
He asked Maya questions about exactly what she touched and when.
He took notes with the same bored expression as every other official she had encountered. After he left, Maya sat in her apartment and stared at the wall. The pieces existed now. A missing child. A missing elderly woman. A basement with evidence of tampering. A mysterious man in janitor's clothing. But the pieces refused to form a picture. That night, she returned to the lobby at 2 a.m. She waited in the shadows near the mailboxes, watching the stairwell door.
An hour passed.
2 hours. At 4:15 a.m., the door opened and the janitor emerged. This time, Maya did not let him disappear into the night. She followed him outside, staying far enough back to avoid detection, close enough to track his movements. He walked to the industrial zone behind the building, picking his way through abandoned lots and collapsed warehouses. The janitor stopped at a structure that might once have been a small factory. Its windows were boarded, its doors secured with chains, but one chain hung loose, recently cut. He disappeared inside. Maya waited 15 minutes, then approached. Her heart pounded so hard she feared he would hear it. She found a gap between boards and pressed her eye to the opening. Inside, a single bare bulb illuminated a scene that would haunt her forever. Mrs. Patterson sat in a corner, alive but heavily sedated, her head lolling against the wall. And next to her, small and frightened but unmistakably breathing, sat Luna.
Maya wanted to scream.
She wanted to crash through the boards and grab her daughter and run until the world ended. But years of nursing had taught her restraint.
Panic killed patience. Panic got people hurt. She needed help.
She retreated silently and ran to the nearest convenience store, where she called 911 and waited for sirens that seemed to take years to arrive. When police finally stormed the building, they found the janitor attempting to flee through a back exit. They found Mrs. Patterson dehydrated but alive. They found Luna wrapped in a blanket, confused but unharmed.
The janitor's name was Marcus Webb.
He had lived in Westerly Heights for 6 months, working odd jobs and studying residents' routines.
He targeted elderly women with medical conditions, sedated them, and held them for weeks while their families grew desperate.
Luna had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time, a witness to Mrs. Patterson's abduction who became a hostage herself.
At the hospital, Maya held her daughter for 3 hours without letting go. Luna asked for macaroni. Maya promised to make it forever.
Mrs. Patterson recovered fully and returned to her apartment, where she received visits from every resident who had previously ignored her existence. The residents of Westerly Heights finally looked at each other differently after that.
Doors opened more easily. Conversations lasted longer. But Maya knew the truth. Monsters didn't live in basements or abandoned factories.
They lived in plain sight, wearing janitor uniforms and carrying mops, invisible to everyone except the mothers who refused to stop looking.